Heavenly Father, we thank you for a new day. We thank you for all that is good. Even as we meet this morning to discuss matters concerning our nation, we ask you to guide our thoughts, to guide our words, and help that everything that we do and say will endure to the benefit of the people of this land. Hasten the footsteps of those who are on their way and give you traveling mercies to us all. We ask for these and all other mercies in your name. Amen.
Thank you. Apologies for absence. I gather there are no apologies. At this point, members, welcome everyone formally, and welcome Permanent Secretary from the Ministry of Transport and Mining and his team. Formally welcome the Auditor General and her team and other personnel from the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. We have with us this morning in the gallery, I am advised, students from Dumfries Primary School all the way from St. James. So we should, I think, give them a hearty welcome. Welcome. We will proceed then with the reading of the minutes. Members, one point I would make by way of an overview of the minutes is that the approach taken to the preparation of minutes has changed this week, in that the questions asked and observations made and so forth are not attributed to anybody in particular. So the style would be like reference was made to this, or the question was asked whether that. But in the past, the persons who initiated a particular point of question or line of questioning or observation would have been mentioned, the member would have been mentioned. Speaking for myself, I prefer that approach to this new one because I think it's useful to know in the record who was raising what issues. So I would just ask the clerk if she'd be so kind as to revert to her former approach.
Why the change, Chair?
I haven't been told why. Having said that, going through the minutes, on page 1, any changes? Page 2, just one point at the bottom of page 2. In the matters arising from the minutes, item 3, regarding the issue of the past non-compliance, it should be with rather than to. There you go, can borrow mine. Page 2. Matters arising, number 3. Compliance with. And on page 3, in the first big paragraph, bottom third of that paragraph, she said a survey undertaken by the Transport Authority revealed that there was a greater need for the take-up of these PPV licenses, it should be, PPV licenses. Page 4, and please, if anyone has any issues, please raise them. Page 4, at the opening, at the top paragraph, the final sentence of that paragraph, I'm assuming it's the same pagination as my copy. I think it actually might be page 3 on the one you have there. The paragraph that began clarification and so on. Yes, in the final paragraph sentence, the fact that such a large number of persons were operating outside, take out the words of the transport sector and just put without licenses. and take out the word and insert the words while there was apparently a declining number of applicants would suggest. So the sentence would read, the fact that such a large number of persons were operating without licenses while there was apparently a declining number of applicants would suggest, etc. And in the following paragraph, at the end, I think a sentence should be added, which was part of the discussion to that paragraph, which was what was being proposed was that driver infractions should be held against owners when deciding whether or not to renew the owner's PPV license. What was being proposed was that driver infractions should be held against owners when deciding whether or not to renew the owner's PPV license. Further down in the paragraph, this might be on page 4 now, I'm not sure. Yes, in the paragraph reference was made, yes. It's a long paragraph, but there's a sentence close to the middle, a little below the middle, which says the decision was taken to capture the information manually on the road and input it at the office, which would allow the Transport Authority to do the kind of analysis which was not currently done. I think the word not is missing. Yeah. Page 5. Page 6. There's a sentence on my page 6, it might be the bottom of your page 5, which says the observation. Observation was made? Yes. I'm trying to make sense of that sentence. I don't know if any member can help me. It's on the ones, it's on page 6, the paragraph, the third paragraph that begins the observation. You see that paragraph? That first sentence, it says the observation was made that the TA could only issue summonses on 3 items in an atmosphere where the ratio was 6 illegal taxis to every 1 legal taxi. I don't know what that is.
The Transport Authority only has a jurisdiction to issue summonses in 3 categories, or just 3 offenses. It's 3 areas that alone that they can issue summonses, while the police can issue a ticket for illegal infractions, but they only have 3 areas within for legal taxes. Illegal, well, no, I think it's the other way. I think they don't really have the jurisdiction, only the police alone, over the illegal, but 3 over the legal. Yeah, I think
maybe we could just reword that sentence just to be a little, just the observation was made that Transport Authority could only issue summonses in 3 areas of, or in 3 categories of offenses, while there were a number of other categories which they were. Well, that's what the minutes. That's what was said. Well, we can say in some then. Only in some categories of offenses. Full stop. That's sufficient. The observation was made that the TA could only issue summonses in some categories of offenses. Yeah. In the same paragraph, a bit further down, there's a sentence that begins, the Land Transport Authority would bring everything under one authority, adding that intrinsic in this approach. I think we have, take out the second intrinsic. Adding that intrinsic in this intrinsic approach, take out the second, yeah. And in this paragraph, 2 paragraphs further on, mention was made a bit below the middle. This meant that there was an imbalance between the TA making money and providing adequate transport for persons in Jamaica, while the entity appeared to be full cost. Next page. The sentence begins, the TA was asked about the number of licenses that were renewed. That one. Near the end of that paragraph. It says, Dr. Hales said that the JUTC has over time assessed its fleet and has given projections starting from 2015 to 2020, which showed that there was a need for an additional fleet. Take out from, there was need for an additional fleet, rather than additionally. And then in further down, where's the paragraph that begins issue 4, the first sentence, the issue of the purchase of second sentence rather. It was noted that the managing director last appeared before the committee, that when the managing director last appeared before the committee, he had purchased 5 Golden Dragon buses which were not of the required size and specification needed. I think you can take out the words of what you. All right. I don't have anything on the next page. In the final page, under any other business, the document was to be circulated to members. The one from I had received it, but the members hadn't received it. Had you? I thought you were going to send it to them. Oh, okay, all right, leave that then. Any other corrections?
I have really not so much a question as a not so much a correction rather as a question. We identify on the matters arising, for example, on page 2 today, item 2 on the matters arising. The MLSS had undertaken to circulate a document to MPs providing information on various aspects of the path. Do we have a mechanism, Mr. Chairman, for the Secretary to the committee, for example, to follow up with these ministries against these commitments, or maybe making a little table of the commitments so that each week we can just track, because sometimes once they're gone, everything is forgotten, and usually there are a number of commitments have been made to provide information, etc.
What I've done so far is go through the minutes carefully to extract those commitments and then mention them as matters arising. But as they grow, I agree that a table of matters arising would be useful on an ongoing cumulative table. So, for example, the 4 that are listed here could be in that table, and as they are addressed, we could say addressed or not yet addressed. Yeah, and that would be a useful tracking mechanism for the committee. Having said that, any other issues with the minutes, or can I put the minutes as amended to the committee? Would anyone move? Member Bunting has moved, seconded by Member Guy. Thank you. In terms of matters arising, well, one matter arising is the development of that table that we just spoke of, or matrix, to track matters arising. And another, I think on page, is it page 8? Yes, on page 8 of these minutes, Mr. Morgan, I think the CEO of the Transport Authority, had indicated that the figures would be forwarded to the committee for the breakdown of the numbers in terms of PPV and Hackney and contract licenses that were issued. So, and this was in the context of saying that the figures for issuance of licenses included both red plate and green plate licenses. So he had promised to give us a breakdown of those figures over the period under discussion, which I think was the last 2 fiscal years. So if we could ask him to follow up, we could follow up with him on that. Yes. The clerk has very helpfully produced a list of matters arising from the minutes, from previous minutes. In terms of uncleared advances, and this relates to the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, there is a letter dated June 29th, 2018 that was received in this matter. This was circulated? This one, I believe, has been circulated to members. I'm told copies were delivered to members where the permanent secretary addressed that issue. It includes another letter, a copy of another letter dated January 30th, 2018 from Mr. Wayne Jones on behalf of the Financial Secretary to her. Members have this letter. Is there anything they want to say on this, or can we treat this as a closed item? Perhaps. It makes the point that the ministry sought and received approval from the Ministry of Finance by its letter dated January 30th, a copy of which we have, to retain the 232 project posts for a period of 3 years with effect from April 1, 2018. And it says, with regard to the document on the path to enable MPs to have a better understanding of the program, please be advised that our team is currently preparing a comprehensive document targeting MPs, complete with a list of frequently asked questions. The information packages will be ready for circulation during the week commencing July 16th, 2018. All right? Yes.
I would like to just go back to the minutes because there's some clarity that is needed. Page 8, issue 4, dealing with the purchase of major assets without the adequate due diligence. Coming back to the buses, it would be good if, for our own use, if there was a written report on the buses on why it is that they, after purchasing the buses, that Mr. Morgan and the team have found them not to be adequate. Reason why I'm raising it, Chair, is that it is the same bus, the Dragon bus, that the JUTC had in its fleet for over a year, testing it on the hilly routes. And Mr. Morgan's reason for not keeping the buses is because it couldn't go over Mount Russell. But these are the same buses that the Knoxford Express is also using, and many within the tourism sector is using also. So the reasoning behind not keeping the buses, my information is that the previous board made a decision in purchasing these buses to transport the staff members. It is this current board that basically went through with the purchase and paid for the buses. So the action of the previous board didn't bring it to the buses being manufactured, and otherwise, I mean, the supplier would have been taking a word of mouth without any purchase order or anything given to him at that point in time. So the argument that it started under the previous board, we only completed it, and after testing it, but these are the same buses that the JUTC, and they have now leased the buses to the JUTC, which are using them on hilly routes. So I would to satisfy why it is, I would, if there is a written from their technical department on why the buses were not adequate for the use that they want them for would be useful.
Okay, well, we could take that as a matter arising from the minutes. And we could ask the Transport Authority to provide us with a briefing on the purchase of those buses, the circumstances in which they were ordered, the circumstances in which they were delivered and paid for, and the reasons why the current board took the view that they were unsatisfactory for the purposes of the Transport Authority and decided to dispose of them. All right. In terms of the other matters arising, we have the second item has been addressed in her letter to do with the document for MPs. And the third item relating to the past alleged non-compliance with tax guidelines and the lack of clarity or consistency in the approach of applying withholding tax to gratuity payments. The clerk has indicated that a letter was written by her to the Director General, the Commissioner General of Tax Administration, Jamaica. His office has indicated that he's on vacation leave and will not return until July 15th. But I would ask, Madam Clerk, if you could circulate a copy of your letter to the members so we can see the terms in which it was framed, because it's a technical issue. Okay, there being no other matters arising, we will proceed to the substantive business of the day. We have two items on the agenda for review. One is the Auditor General's assessment of the financial statements of Clarendon Alumina Production Limited CAP, and the other is the compendium by the Auditor General from a special investigation that was done on Aeronautical Telecommunications Limited, Aerotel, which is a subsidiary, I believe, of the Civil Aviation Authority. We will begin with CAP. And I would invite the Auditor General just to give us an introductory overview of the issues.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, and good morning, members. Mr. Chairman, if you just permit me to provide you with an update on the two outstanding actionable matters that involves the Auditor General's Department that I'm to get back to the committee on. One has to do with the Ministry of Labour and Social Security, which we are currently following up on. The other has to do with the RMF and the rate that was used. I know that at that meeting I had indicated that the finding was as a result of the audit of the financial statements. And so the figures used were not generated by the department, but by the RMF. Now, having done a follow-up, I've received a preliminary report, and as a result of the questions asked, we're now doing a deeper dive into the matters that would have resulted in the variance, which we would not have done with the financial statement audit. And there are things that are coming up as a result of that deeper dive. We have asked the ministry to provide a response. I don't know that they have responded as yet, but as a matter of protocol, Chair, there are issues that are coming up that would not have been previously reported. And so I believe that as a matter for proper order, I will have to submit that report to Parliament for tabling by the Speaker of the House, because it's new issues that would be introduced that would not have been reported in the annual report before. And the matters, new issues generally come to the PAC, my understanding, through the Speaker of the House. So I am just asking for additional time to do a proper deep dive into it, so I can come. As I said, the initial finding was as a result of the financial statements, and we were just speaking, and in fact we had used the average figures. We are now using the daily rates, which of course would have resulted in different figures coming up, which you can understand it would be more than what we had initially reported. But there are other issues as well. So I'm just asking for time to do a proper review of that, obtaining the response from the ministry, and based on that response, I will determine whether or not it warrants tabling the report separately.
Yeah, I have no objection. Any objection from the members? No, please proceed accordingly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I just went to make a recommendation here. I know you said that you want to look at CAP first, but I think the matter with Aerotel, I think have been, some of them, one particular outstanding matter would have been addressed, and so that would leave only one issue. So I don't know if it probably would be best to look at Aerotel so that they could be released.
That's fine. I only took CAP first because it was on the agenda first.
Okay.
But yes, that would make sense. So let's just start with Aerotel.
Good. So for Aerotel, there were 3 issues that we reported. One had to do with the 32.4 million paid in traveling allowances, for which there was no proper authorization from the Ministry of Finance. The second has to do with a 1.92 million, which was incurred for telephone charges for the chairman, who was since separated. And the other was a procurement issue, which the Aerotel has responded to say that they have implemented corrective measures. And of course, we can only verify the effectiveness of those measures with a subsequent audit. What I can report is that at our request, the Ministry of Finance has actually prepared and submitted a letter to Aerotel on the 2nd of July, that would have been yesterday, advising that approval, retroactive approval, has been granted for the entire amount paid. I noticed that the letter has a proviso to say, with the exception of the senior secretary and the billing clerk, and I saw the letter for the first time this morning, so that is something that I will just have to get an explanation on. But
the CUG charge?
No, not the CUG charge. The traveling allowance, which amounts to 32.44 million. But basically, the Ministry of Finance has granted the necessary authority for that. So I would have no further interest in the matter. And of course, the ministry would have cautioned the Aerotel in terms of how to address these issues going forward.
Chairman, might I, AG, you said
Sure.
that it was yesterday you received another letter which would have covered the period that the audit would have sought the approvals for, because you, in the response, there's another letter of last year which gave effect from September 1, 2016, which was subsequent to the audit period. So you're saying yesterday's letter covered the previous period?
Covers the entire period. Thanks. September 1, 2016,
Yeah,
going forward.
Going forward.
Right.
Yeah.
The next matter then, Mr. Chairman, which I'll hand over, is regarding the outstanding amount for the CUG charges. Thanks.
Yes.
Mr. Armstrong.
If you would just introduce yourself, sir, and then give us what you have to say on that particular issue.
Yes, good morning, members. I'm Howard Armstrong, General Manager of Aerotel. The Auditor General's findings with regards to a former chairman who demitted office at the start of 2012 and subsequent mobile phone charges aggregated to some in excess of $1.9 million. There was a confluence of events that occurred at the time, a changing of our mobile phone contract, the departure of the general manager, that led to a breakdown in controls, so that we did not appreciate that the phone was still in the hands of the previous chairman. There were some modest charges that we assumed to have been the charges of the new chairman. And then there were 4 months where the charges jumped up significantly due to international roaming. When we realized this, we immediately disconnected the service and pursued all possible efforts, including rigorous pursuits through the courts, to recover the funds. We obtained a judgment in default because the courts were not able to find the gentleman. And after spending quite a fair sum and expending over 2 years of effort, the subsequent board, which the current board has ratified, is that we would now be reaching the point of diminishing returns in trying to recover these funds, and that we would draw a line under the matter at this stage.
Chairman.
Chairman.
I have listened to the general manager's explanation, and I have a little concern because he said there was a confluence of different things happening at the same time. And one was a change of service provider contract. And to my mind, this would suggest that you're changing from one provider to the next. So is it that the numbers were carried over to the next provider? Because to my view, we did not have that facility yet for one carrier to assume the number of another carrier. And secondly, he indicated that they thought that first it was the then current chairman's bills that were coming in, which leads me to believe that 2 persons were using the same phone. Because if it was assumed by the office that the bills that were coming in for the previous chairman's phone and those coming in for the new bill, and to assume that they were the bills of the current chairman, suggests that both parties were using the same phone, same number, which doesn't work. It doesn't make any sense. Thank you for that. And I find it equally strange, as reported by the AG, that the phone was used for 23 months after he left. 23 months after, almost 2 years, Chairman. And the officers, 3 levels of approval, which includes certifying and authorizing officers, senior accounting staff, and check signatories, director of finance and other. And I say that, Chairman, as having served in government, the day I demitted officer, I was demanded by the permanent secretary to leave the phone, my diplomatic passport, right, the keys for the vehicle unless I was purchasing it, and whatever else, the keys for the office on which I resided,
and no notice
before I left the building. No, I say that because this is my understanding of what usually happens in the system. And now to come to this committee and hear that explanation, it doesn't wash.
Through you, Chair.
Yes.
Can you also clarify? You mentioned that the courts could not find this person for a period of time. I'm not.
Courts don't look for people, though, so that isn't. The person couldn't be found by, presumably, whatever investigative process was being used to try and find the person. Yeah, courts don't go and seek people. You know, if you hire a bailiff. Yeah. So yeah. So
Chairman, I want to concur with Member Guy. When I asked to speak, that's where I was going. That I find it incomprehensible that for 23 months, phone being used and someone said they didn't know about it or what have you. They didn't discover. This don't really make sense, I can tell you, and I agree with Member Guy. It does make sense. So I believe they ought to come with a more plausible explanation than the one that I've just heard. That's not workable. in our modern days.
It does seem very odd, General Manager, doesn't it, that bills are coming in with charges ascribed to this number. This was the number assigned to the former chairman, and they are just being paid. Is it that there was negligence on the part of the staff that were checking to see whether or not these charges ought to be paid?
Yes, members, let me offer a bit further clarity. So we accept that there was a breakdown in controls. We accept that. What happened is that the general manager left shortly before the chairman left, and he is the one who would normally interact with the chairman to recover the phone and ensure all these things are done and so forth. So,
Chairman,
so there was a breakdown. But if I could
just a minute.
Sure.
I'd advise you don't go there. You're saying the general manager would interact with the chairman. I'm talking about paying these bills, 1.92 million. Yes. The general manager has nothing to do with it, so please don't go there.
Yes.
It stated clearly the authorizing officers. Mm-hmm. So the general manager has nothing to do with this, okay? So please don't go there. I want to be mild and gentle. You're insulting our intelligence when you go there.
But
okay?
Member Warmington, he's responding to what Member Guy had said about the process of handing over. So I think it's unfair to tell him not to do that. Go ahead, please. Yes.
Yeah, so thank you, Chairman. So that was where the breakdown in that control and recovery of the phone occurred. Certainly, the other thing, to respond to the query, it was not a change in provider. It was a new contract. The old contract terminated, a new contract with the same supplier continued. And under that contract, the new chairman, and all subsequent chairmen of Airtel have not had a phone. Not had a phone. So this phone was assumed to have been by the finance people to have been in the use of the new chairman. But in fact, the new chairman did not have a phone, declined to have a phone. So there was a breakdown. These charges were very modest, $1,000 and so on like that for several months. But then over a year into the thing, it spiked up tremendously, and then that's when we realized it, cut it off immediately. These were roaming charges from far-flung places, Philippines and all sorts of places. And those roaming charges do tend to come in several months after sometimes because, they are billed in a foreign land and then transferred to our service provider and then billed. So the second month of recognizing these high bills, they were cut off, but then there were residual coming in for 2 further months before it was completely truncated.
Is there a reason why you've decided not to proceed any further with the legal process of trying to recover funds from this person? That you can't find him now, you don't know where he is, or that he's a man of straw and it's not likely that you'll be able to recover this money from him? Because from the reports I met, both issues were raised. I wasn't sure if they're both still relevant or what is the driving.
The primary reason is that we could not find him. We made our own efforts, our lawyer made efforts, and the courts, required his participation at court. He was never to be found. That was the primary reason.
Chairman,
okay.
Last year, I think it was the year before, and I'm sure that's not unique to me, we would get some letters from seemingly friends of ours that say that I am in Russia, Moscow, and I've lost all my belongings. And could you send me some money to this particular address? Scammers, of course, But I find here that the GM says that this individual had calls, roaming charges as far away as the Philippines, but yet he's destitute, as the manager's response here indicate. So he's either stowaway on one of those cruise liners that we have a lot of Philippines working on here, or a merchant ship, as Member Warmington is suggesting, or he lent and lost his phone, and someone else is using it. Chairman, I am, what's the word, aghast that this is what we are hearing here today. And I am happy that it was detected at the time when they saw a Filipino call that they decided to terminate the service. But I'm disappointed that it took 23 months for this recognition to come to light. And certainly, someone in the organization needs to be penalized for this gross oversight of what has happened. It cannot continue, or it ought not to have reached that stage.
Member Warmington.
Chairman, to follow up on Member Guy, they can't find this individual. Then how on God's hurt you know that he's destitute? You can't find him. How you know he's destitute? That's a question I'd like someone to answer.
Good question.
The issue is that the state, to recover, they can't find this guy. I forget the word the gentleman just used a while ago. What was the word he used? If the guy cannot be found, how do you know that he's destitute? What method did you use to find out that he's destitute?
GM? Yes?
Again, the main reason is that we can't find him. The destitute is in our research and efforts to find him. We were hearing that that is more hearsay than a definite fact.
Should be name reported. Should not put it in your response. Not put it in your response.
Yes, your comments on this.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I think, according to the FAA Act, certain procedures, I'm not sure if they were followed by Airtel. The person has a phone that belongs to the organization and that doesn't belong to him. Secondly, the person is incurring charges knowingly, and I wonder if the matter was not something that should have been reported to the police, and that whether that shouldn't have been the correct course of action rather than engaging legal and incurring, significant legal expenses to try and chase down the person through the court. I'm not too sure. It's not very clear from Airtel's response whether the matter was actually reported to the police and therefore get the state involved in the investigation and if required, any subsequent charges to be laid against this person.
Well, GM, do you know whether this was reported to the police or did you treat it entirely as a civil matter?
The issue predates my appointment, but my understanding is that it was treated as a civil matter pursued rigorously through the courts. It was also reported to the Ministry of Finance and the Auditor General's Department as soon as we realized the issue.
In circumstances like this where the controls have broken down and you're unable to recover the money against the person who used the phone wrongfully, who bears the loss? Is the loss to be absorbed by taxpayers, or are the persons who are responsible for the breakdown in the control mechanisms in any way held to account? Yes, that's a question for you, really.
Well, it depends on the findings of the Auditor General. There is a provision for surcharge if officers in the organization can be found culpable, and the surcharge proceedings normally are recommended by the Auditor, are determined by the Auditor General, and depending on which officer in the organization, because clearly there would be a breakdown in the administration of the systems and procedures, and at some stage, some check and balance was not properly observed, and therefore that would point to where culpability lies, and from that perspective, surcharge procedures could be levied. It could also be, general weakness in systems and procedures, whereby the perpetrator was so cunning as to bypass those systems. But in this case, it's not very clear. I think the perpetrator, the ex-chairman knew very well that he ought to have returned the phone and ought not to have incurred the expenses. So the first line of action, of course, as Aerotel has attempted to do, is to try and recover the funds. But you cannot, there is always a feeling that somewhere in the system there should be some culpability.
Chairman.
Yes.
Might I ask a question? I've been, prior to this sitting, this period here, I've sat on the Public Accounts Committee from 2002, and I've heard about surcharges and surcharges. Could I ask the Minister of Finance, if based on the recommendations of the AG that surcharges are to be done to the officers, if the total amount that is as exposure is recouped? Just for my personal edification.
Could the Ministry of Finance respond to that question, whether when surcharges are imposed pursuant to a recommendation from the Auditor General, whether it is the full amount of the loss that is generally recouped, or is it some portion thereof? And if so, how is that determined?
It's discretionary. So based on the circumstances, we would follow up in terms of investigation, and you also, there's a number of circumstances that are considered on the humanitarian grounds, etc., and then a decision is made as to the amount to be recovered.
Chairman, may I ask also, how often the recommendation of surcharge is instituted? How often that is done? How often do you do? Because member guys has been coming here since, you have been in the committee since
2002, you said.
I've started serving this committee in 1980. And that is something that I'm really done. So I'd like to know how often we institute recommendation surcharges.
Do you have a sense?
No, I couldn't answer that clearly. We would have to go back and do a report. But we do. No, I wouldn't say.
It would be interesting to know
depends on the circumstances.
How many new
cases?
Impositions of surcharge are done per year on average over the last 10 years? Say.
10 years.
Yeah,
okay, we will present that report.
Yes, thank you. Member Dalrymple.
Thank you very much, Chairman. If I might be permitted, who is the past chairman? Who is the gentleman? Does anybody know who it was?
Gentleman's name is Maurice Henry. Maurice Henry.
Member Dunn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm here sitting down, and I'm not sure if I can accept the position of Mr. Armstrong that it's just a breakdown of systems, because here's an organization that has 3 levels of approval, not 1, not 2, but 3. So is there some culpability somewhere in the system to allow this to have occurred?
Well, he has indicated that there was a breakdown in the system. I mean, in other words, somebody erred in not picking this up. That's quite clear. The question really is, the Auditor General, I don't think, has recommended a surcharge at this point. It hasn't reached there wasn't sufficient clarity, perhaps, or pointing to the culpability of one or more individuals. What would be your view on that matter?
Aerotel falls under the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act and would not be subject to surcharge. So surcharge is generally restricted to ministries, departments, and agencies that fall under the FAA Act. So this has to go through the courts based on the provision in the PBMA.
So in public bodies that don't form part of central government, the surcharge procedure is not available?
It's not applicable, no.
So in those instances, for the entity to recover funds, they would have to take proceedings to do so, or impose some kind of disciplinary procedure where it was agreed that this would be recovered over time from a culpable individual in exchange for giving them the opportunity to continue in their job, or some such arrangement.
Precisely, and that is why all effort is generally taken to gain restitution through, either consent order between the individual and the entity to avoid the charges associated with legal action.
So, in a sense, this is a victory of form over substance, where a very important mechanism for holding people accountable and recovering funds that have been lost to the public purse by virtue of negligence or other worse wrongdoings is not available across the entire public sector, but is limited to those that are ministries, departments, and agencies, i.e. part of central government itself, civil servants, as opposed to statutory bodies, or I'm not sure executive agencies where they fall in that.
Agencies as well. However, there is also a restriction to the surcharge because the matter has to be identified within 3 years. So once 3 years lapses, then there's a lapse. Then there's no action that can be taken.
There's a limitation period.
There is a limitation.
Is that in the FAA?
Yes.
Okay. So 3 years from the date of the infraction?
That's right.
Whereas the normal time for civil proceedings in our jurisdiction is 6
Yes.
years.
And oftentimes we're really racing against that time, because when the matter is identified, it's usually on the cusp of time, the expiration of the period.
So the surcharge system supersedes the normal civil lawsuit that would have been available?
I don't think so. I would be surprised if the normal rights that would arise, whether under contract or in the law relating to civil wrongs, would cease to apply. But the remedy of surcharge, which is convenient because it allows deductions to be made at source, I would imagine, from pay, that apparently ceases to be available after 3 years. I'm not sure what the thinking was when the legislation put that limit in, but to an extent it represents an anomaly vis-a-vis the normal time period in which claims can be brought to recover money that was wrongfully, which was misappropriated in some way. Member Dunn?
Maybe I missed it, Chairman, but how much money has been expended so far to recover this through the courts?
Just over $250,000.
Yes, Member.
Just want to find out, as it is now, what system has been put in place for a non-recurrence of this? And second, before we even reach there, what system was in place at that time to monitor? Because obviously, or even if it is at the accounts level when a bill is being paid, why wait until 23 months before even, why not after 3 months then, in just disconnecting the phone, even if the bill was $1,000 per month? Why wait so long to take action?
Thank you, Member. If I could just respond to the second question first. Certainly, since then we have put in rigorous, very rigorous controls around all aspects of our COG policy. It's been reviewed by the current board. It's been sent to the Ministry of Finance for further review. Limits such as the recent limit on CEO and chairman phone bills of $40,000 per month. Before, there was no limit on those two categories. Limit was recommended recently, and we have adopted that, and have rigorous controls around people leaving and the recovery of the phone, not leaving it only to their immediate supervisor, but getting the IT department and the HR department involved as well. So we are confident that there will be no recurrence of this sort of lapse. Going back to the historical context, we accept the breakdown. I want to reiterate that the real breakdown was in not recovering the phone, because in the transfer to a new contract that immediately happened, and the new chairman not taking a phone, and I've looked at the contract documents, and I see how it was assumed that that phone was assigned to the new chairman, who in fact did not have a phone. And the bills were running for months, but at $1,000 and nominal fees that would not.
But seeing that there was not somebody in the organization would have at least recognized, hopefully, because it would beg the question, how many more incidents like this do you probably have inside in the organization? You know, because something simple as a phone, and you have a change of board. Someone inside there would have recognized that a phone has not been returned, and there's just
this was
simple
picked up
one,
in the
two.
special investigation.
Yeah, no. So there seems to be a lack of persons taking responsibility for, or was there someone or a department in charge of taking responsibility for monitoring this? And if not, is that person still in the position that they were in before? Because there is a lack somewhere, Chairman.
Yeah.
There's been
Please permit me. I think the PS said very clearly, look, there seems to have been a lapse. He admits that somewhere along the line something went wrong. The charges are not astronomical, and they're there and they have to be accounted for. And I think we have made it very clear. I asked who was the gentleman who was there. A name was given. I don't even remember what the name was that was given at the time. But I think that what needs to happen, we need to move on, is that they have to understand that the systems must be put in place. And the Auditor General has said clearly that this thing of surcharges does not apply to public bodies. They have to go through the courts. They did go through the courts, and they have not found him. I asked what was the name of the person. I did so specifically, since he's lost, maybe somebody will, hear the name. This is a public meeting, and find him. But I don't think we can go any further than what the PS said.
I have one more point to make. GM, has the board, to the best of your knowledge, or management, considered whether any action should be taken internally arising from the failure to pick this up, to hold anybody accountable, or is the feeling that there was not sufficient, the breaches that took place were not sufficiently egregious to warrant that? Since there's no surcharge procedure available, but has there any other form of disciplinary action been considered?
In the entire ensuing investigation, there was a suspension of the senior accountant at the time. In the ensuing aftermath and all the investigation and all that went on, that took place. Having looked at it carefully myself and seeing the mechanics of how it happened, it should never have happened. But looking at the contract, I can understand how it was assumed that that phone was in the hands of the new chairman, and so my view is that that action that was taken suffices.
Okay, can we move on to the next item, which is the procurement issue to do with the machinery? AG, you have any?
Well, I have that matter as keep in view, based on the response.
All right, so I think we can finish with Airtel then for now. Members, interesting issues. The fact that the surcharge procedure doesn't apply across the board in the public sector, but depends on the type of entity. To my mind, that is a deficiency in the system. The fact that there's a 3-year limitation period is also a deficiency, because we've heard from the Auditor General that quite often these things only emerge just about when that period is expiring, or perhaps afterwards, and therefore the surcharge procedure isn't available. And then we've asked the Ministry of Finance for some data going back 10 years on the number of new surcharge interventions per year that have been applied. Thank you. Thank you, Airtel.
Thank you.
We will now move on to Clarendon Alumina Production Limited, CAP. And Madam Auditor General, perhaps you could just give us a little intro into this to get the ball rolling.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, the financial statements assessment largely focused on CAP's key financial ratios over the period 2012-13 to 2016-17, and a report was provided on that. I do hope you have the full report because CAP was very thorough in its response, where it responded paragraph by paragraph to the report. So I think the prompt is less useful in this area. The financial ratios reflected general weaknesses in CAP's operations, in particular debt exposure and its ability to generate adequate cash to meet its short-term obligations. As can be appreciated, Mr. Chairman, CAP's profitability is highly dependent on the world prices for bauxite and alumina, as well as its ability to effectively manage major input costs such as energy and wages. As a precursor to the joint venture agreement with Noble, the government acquired US $389.6 million of CAP's debt. And of course, this would have had a positive impact by improving the solvency ratio. However, subsequent to that, there's a general reduction, weakening of that solvency ratio, where we show that the debt stock rose by approximately 33.8%, which is largely due to CAP's drawdown on a US $120 million loan facility provided by Noble towards repaying CAP's existing financial obligations and funding its production cost in Jamaica. Notwithstanding that facility, CAP has still experienced inadequate working capital and liquidity constraints in the context where the trade receivables from Noble has increased. So this necessitated additional government support of US $27 million to settle the outstanding arrears to Noble.
What form did that government support take? Was it a loan that was provided?
A loan.
And through which lending agency, do you know? Was it through Petrocarib Fund or who? No.
No.
Who was the provider of the funds?
Ministry of Finance, 27 million US.
Okay, well, perhaps Mr. Hayden, you could introduce yourself to the committee, and we will start our review of this.
Yes, I'm Winston Hayden. I'm the Managing Director for Clarendon Alumina Production. And should I reply to the opening comments? Is that what I'm doing?
Go ahead.
Okay, usually with these things it's a matter of just how you state the context. The 120 million was in fact a part of the starting point, because that refinancing, what the government did was to allow you to tidy up your balance sheet. And then 120 million was borrowed to take us through a period that everybody knew was going to be difficult. The 120 million paid off 75 million that was owed to Alcoa. And then the idea of the rest of it was that until the market recovered, and it is in fact the aluminum market, not the alumina market, because we don't sell on spot. We are price takers from the index of aluminum, a percentage of the London Metal Exchange. So that was our starting point, our context. Apart from that, I have no clarification to make.
So why have you needed additional financial support from the government, since the government absorbed such a large amount of debt? When was it, 2013, 14?
2013, but remember that we would have had about, 40 million of that. It's not the whole 120, because most of it went to paying off the debt to Alcoa. And
but when that transaction with Noble was done, and the bulk of your debt, US dollar denominated debt, was absorbed by the government, a new facility was made available by Noble, who you were bringing into Jamalco, or into CAP.
Well, we started with them as a trading relationship. They were just buying the alumina.
But the 120 million was part of the original arrangement. That's what they brought to the table.
It was, yes.
But was it known then that that was not going to be sufficient to carry you forward, or has market conditions worsened?
It expected. We thought 2 or 3 years the market would recover. It has taken quite a bit longer. In the 2015, 2016, the index was around about $1,600 a ton. We thought it would have recovered to about low 20s, maybe 21 or 2,200 in a couple of years. So it has taken longer. That's about where the market is now, but it has taken a bit longer.
The pricing now is over 2,000?
Very close to that. It has been like that for most of this year. 22, 23. I think you'll be aware of the confusion in the geopolitics and so on, that some things have to play out. As it is, the price of alumina is high, but the metal, because of the U.S. trade policy and the way people are processing it, those expectations, the metal price is a bit depressed. How it will pay out, I don't know.
So 100% of CAP's share of Jamalco's production is sold to Noble under contract?
Yes, under 2 arrangements. Half of it is fixed. We have to sell them. Roughly half of it is by option, what they call a put-call option. Whereas if we are forcing them, we force them at a lower price. If they are forcing us, they force us at a higher price.
Both of those prices are indexed to the world aluminium price.
Same metal exchange, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, could the general manager explain, the MD, managing director, explain? And I say this really on behalf of the elderly and vulnerable constituents who are getting minimal payments from PATH, pension, etc. Why is the government involved as a commercial player in this industry when we've lost $274 million US over the last 5 years alone? That's 35 billion Jamaican dollars, over that at today's exchange rate. Why are we involved in this activity? Clearly, we're not skilled at it, and we're hemorrhaging, and it just seems, you know, as long as I can remember, we've been in this position.
You asked me to explain a government policy. Yes, you smile on your face, but
so you can't figure it out either, is what you're saying?
I can tell you the rationale on which the arrangement was set up. The rationale on which the arrangement was set up was that at some point you would recover a true value for the asset. If you look at, for example, the information that has been published about Noble's value, if you divided that by 55 and multiply it by 45, you'd get a sense of what may be possible for the government to recover. So it's not a question. It's not a philosophical point I'm making.
What is that? Don't give me 55 over 45.
Yeah, it suggests like it's about 400 odd million, just on that basis. That's what that suggests.
So every 5 years, we're going to lose nearly 300 million on the hope that one day we can recover 400 million. I mean, that still doesn't seem like a commercial justification to me.
No, I was really hesitating, member, to answer your strategic question. That's a little bit above my pay grade. I'm the guy who, being on the bridge, tries to run it in keeping with the policy framework. And in that policy framework, if you ask me, if you're going to give it away as has been announced in the past. If you say CAP must sell this, its value is $1. Okay? As we have said in the past, IMF say it must sell. Nobody offering you a good price. If you organize and you take strategic steps, then there could be a point at which you can realize a reasonable value. I'm not saying you're going to regain what you lost, what you put in the business over time.
Just remind me, is CAP slated for privatization? I know
Yes.
the minister's talking about putting it on the stock exchange.
So it has been for a number of years, and we found that there was no good offer in the context of everybody knowing you have to sell. That actually is how Noble got into the picture when Glencore took advantage strategically of that situation.
So currently, the Alumina refinery is managed by Noble or by Jamaica? Who manages our
They are the managing partners.
They are the managing partners, yeah. And they are known to be experiencing some fairly severe financial problems themselves now.
Yeah.
How is that impacting on CAP and on Jamaica and on CAP currently?
Yes, over the last year and a half, it has been difficult, both up and down. At certain times, Jamaica really experienced some cash flow issues because of the terms of trade. You know, everybody kicks you when you're down. So your terms of trade required more cash. But there has been some recovery. First of all, the entity that owns Jamaica is comfortably cash positive. So they're able to fund the Jamaica operation. And recently, a few days ago, there was...
When you say the entity that owns Jamaica, you mean the entity that owns Noble's equity
Yes.
in the plant? Okay.
Yes, the downstream company that owns Jamaica.
And they have 55%?
They have 55%.
So when your share of production is sold to Noble currently, that's on a cash basis or you generate a receivable for that?
It's supposed to be paid in 3 or 4 days. Generally it is, but there are times when it has been it has taken longer.
What is your current exposure to them in terms of balances owing to them, and how much do you owe them?
Okay, right now, the debt of CAP to the joint venture, which is where it comes out, because somebody has to fund the operation, is $20 million. It's going to be reduced further this month, but at the end of June, that's what that was.
And when you sell your share of production to Noble, is that a joint venture sale or is that a CAP sale?
No, the commercial arrangement is separate. The joint venture is joint. We take joint decisions in relation to Jamaica, but we off-take our alumina and sell it to them on the basis of the agreement that was put in place in 2013.
And how much money are we currently owed by Noble for our share of production?
At the moment, they don't owe us anything beyond the normal 3-day period.
Is it expected that Noble is going to be able to retain that asset, or is it anticipated that it's going to change hands?
Well, the way they have restructured it, they formed 2 companies, and one is an asset company, and the Jamaica asset looms large in that. So they have said they're not, so let me make sure I'm answering your question. If it's expected that they'll retain it, I mean, that's their policy position. They've said they're not selling it.
Just, Mr. MD, if the taxpayers of this country decide they've had enough with this commercial venture and they wanted to cut their losses, now, what would it cost us to get out of this commercial venture, to cease our participation?
Well, I don't think we'd get out at a cost if we're going to sell the asset. It would comfortably cover what is owed.
So at this point, if there was a decision a policy decision to exit this investment, it wouldn't cost us anything further in net, is what, by your estimate?
By my estimate, unless we announce a fire sale.
Unless we announce a fire sale. And if there was a fire sale, how much, what it would cost us to get
who lines up at the fire.
It would what?
It depends on who lines up at the fire.
But at most, we have 20 million in obligations currently owed, which would be cauterized at that.
To the joint venture, we owe 140 million on the 2013 loan.
And that 120 million is now 140 million?
Yes, because we had a moratorium. We're drawing it down now, but it had gone up because for 2 years we paid no interest.
So you're not paying down the principal?
We're paying it down now, but it took us maybe 3 years to start paying.
Over what period is it going to be amortized?
It's 12 years, 2 years moratorium, and then 10.
And
then you owe the government some money too. How much do you still owe them?
We owe them 13.4 million out of the 27 they loaned us.
14 and 13 and 20. Those are your main debts.
Pardon?
140 plus 13 plus 20 owed to the JV. Okay.
The lender is a commercial lender? The loan? Who is it?
It's an 8% loan. Noble.
Noble is the lender? Okay. So it's your joint venture partner who is also...
I'm sorry, I missed some of what you said there.
No, so Noble is the joint venture partner.
Yes.
And Noble is also the funder of the of CAP to cover the historical obligations that you're incurred with Alcoa.
Is it?
Yes. Number of questions. While the forecasting is not an exact science, when the forecasting was done, you said you thought more or less there were a turnaround industry in 3 years. Who did the forecasting, and what is the relationship with those forecasters to the industry itself to have given you that level of confidence?
Well, the management on the board at the time did its assessments using the forward curve that covered curves that were published, but also our own judgment on the future of the Jamalco operation, the number of things that would have gone into that, price of oil, price of caustic soda, what capital works were planned, what the future of the equipment performance and so on would be.
Could you indicate, in terms of capital expenditure going forward, what is the condition of the plant? And I know there's a power plant that's being built. Is a power plant being built at Jamalco, and it's to serve Jamalco, to provide them with steam, and you'll be selling electricity to the grid? Tell us a bit about that project.
Yeah, you've described it quite accurately. The power plant is now, they've cleared the site, and it will be built over the next 20 months or so, 22 months.
Who's building that plant?
There are a number of entities involved. Black and Veatch is the engineering firm. Siemens is involved. A number of entities doing specialized parts of it.
I think you mean who are the developers, who are the owners?
That's New Fortress Energy.
New Fortress. So will CAP have new obligations to New Fortress Energy now in terms of a sort of take or pay type arrangement?
No, there's a steam supply agreement, and we'll buy the steam at a per barrel equivalent, like roughly $40 a barrel of oil equivalent, as an alternative fuel now.
Okay, but I'm saying, is CAP tied into any long-term arrangements with this? For example, I was asking earlier if we wanted to exit, what were the obstacles? But it sounds like we've probably gone into another 20 or 25 years.
No, because that's not the financial arrangement. There's a steam offtake agreement, and Jamalco must take that steam for over the next 20 years. If it's operating.
At a price equivalent to $40 per barrel for oil? the steam is priced at
energy equivalent of.
It's a rough energy equivalent. Please don't pull me exactly to the dollar. But
it's a 20-year arrangement.
And it's a 20-year arrangement, but all you're doing is taking off steam. So if it would only not suit you if oil prices were much lower than that. And there are some other efficiencies anyway.
In terms of capex, for the plant, what is the age of the plant? What anticipated capital expenditure will be required in order to keep the plant producing at an efficient, at a level which would ensure that if there's a downturn in the alumina market, it won't be the first to be closed and would rather be, one of the last to be closed because its cost of production is and its efficiency levels are in the top, let us say, quartile of plants around the world, or what? I mean, what is the state of our plant in terms of its competitiveness, and what capex do you anticipate will be needed in the future, and how will that be financed?
To the best of my knowledge, the guideline would be about $20 per ton of alumina. We think we are in that range in capital expenditure. We're doing some other things to make pretty sure that we push way back the spending of any more mud lakes. Those are one of the really big capital consumers. The plant does a little more than that. It uses a concept called monitoring and managing the residual value of the overall equipment. They come up with a figure for that, and we keep pretty close to that. It is a 1972 plant, but as most of the people who are interested in equipment would know, you pull out components. Doesn't mean that every part of the plant is 72 years old, and the parts that are 72 vintage, and the parts that are that old are usually things like tanks and so on that are, that have a pretty high life.
When you said $20 per ton, I think you said.
Yeah, it's a 1.4 million ton plant, so roughly 25 million would be a reasonable capital budget. Trying not to get too far in commercial numbers if you don't push me.
No, but I just want to understand though that in practice, how do you finance that component of the budget? Is that done out of your cash flow?
Yes, that's what you have to do. That's what we have to do. But in a normal business, you don't really finance capital out of normal operating cash flow. It is one of the things you have to bear in mind when you look at the performance of the plant. Because you're not always comparing apples and oranges when you look at it in relation to another operation.
And where does the plant rank in terms of its efficiency in global terms?
All right, if you took the cost of fuel out, that plant is top quartile, right? If you did it on consumption, believe it or not, if you took out the cost of fuel, it's among the top quartile. It was always, except for fuel adjustment, in the top quartile of the Alcoa plants, and sometimes even with that borne in mind.
The fuel cost is largely fuel purchased to generate steam?
Yes, steam and electricity.
And electricity. So going forward, you will be buying the steam from New Fortress under this offtake arrangement?
Well, 40% of it, but we do have an option to convert the rest of it to dual fire, so that in that case we're not beholden to them for steel. And in fact, we have a dual fire arrangement with them in relation to the steam too, so that if they can't produce it, they'll fund us. Getting complicated on a basis that relates to the price of to that same per barrel price that I cited.
Now, Mr. Chairman, just in terms of your question, which is one I have an interest in, where it falls, Mr. Hayden said it falls in the top quartile if you exclude energy. But where does it fall as we are today, and where do you expect it to fall when the new fortress arrangement comes into operation?
I'm answering you recklessly with that. It's not a researched answer, not a recently researched answer, but I would say it would be in the top quartile. I tell you that that plant uses 10.3 gigajoules to make a ton of alumina. It's roughly a barrel and a half, and there are very few plants in the world that can do that. So it's just that we're paying more for the oil when we use that oil.
No, I'm really struggling to understand the economics as outlined by Mr. Hayden, because if you have one of the most efficient plants, the prices have been moving favorably in recent years, and yet you're still losing money. Then
it's not hard. It's not hard. Sorry, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you.
You know, I mean, what is it that I am missing? You said your plant is efficient. The prices have been of your product has been going up. Your fuel costs are manageable and will become even better. Why is it you keep losing money?
I'll give you in simple numbers. And I'm going to round the gigajoule usage to 10. A plant in the States that is near to the natural gas gate pays $3 per gigajoule, they're paying $30. I buy my heavy oil for $60, I'm paying $90. That's $60 difference per ton of alumina. That's why we're trying to solve the fuel problem.
It is the fuel source, or put it this way, the cost of fuel to the plant based on its geographic location that will affect no matter how efficient it is, it will be, it's more, what should I say, it's more significant, the energy source and its proximity to the energy source. For example, I remember when Alcan had a big stake in the Jamaica bauxite alumina industry. Alcan used a lot of electricity generated by hydro, which was relatively cheap then. So would that have given them the advantage in the smelting process at that time?
Getting it free. So it's like I'm eating steak. I might have a smaller appetite than you if you eat potatoes, but I'm going to pay more for food than you. So to summarize all that, to respond to all that you have said, the only thing I would say is that, as you cited with Alcan, geography would have been a major factor. But as you know, it's not the only factor. It's just we're speaking for simplicity here on something that's more complex than that.
But is this something that we're going to overcome in the near future?
We think
is this fortress arrangement going to fundamentally change our cost competitiveness from the fuel perspective?
It would certainly give you a cost stability and will give you options as long as there's an economic choice between heavy fuel oil and gas. Then we are in play because we're going to be able to use both.
Currently, your power...
And there are some other efficiencies from natural gas use.
What are your current arrangements for fuel and energy? You buy from the grid? How do you generate?
No, we make our own. We're using heavy fuel oil. We're now buying a little bit from the grid, but it is perhaps it's a small portion. It's probably little more than 5% of the overall cost of our energy component.
Just want to find out the arrangement with New Fortress.
Fortress, yes.
Right. Given that it's going to be an option for the factory itself, the plant. If you do decide not to purchase then from them at that point in time, because maybe the price of oil would have then reduced below your fixed price with them. What then do they do with the plant in the middle of?
Well, Well, you do have the option in relation to 60%, but not to the 40. Not to 40%.
Explain for me.
In other words, the plant, I mean, you would imagine that anybody building a 300 million US plant would have wanted some
guarantees. So
some
it is the guarantees that I'm trying to find out. What are the guarantees?
And
that
the
you have given?
guarantee is that as long as we are operating, we take 300 kilopounds of steam from them.
What's the 40%?
That's the 40.
40% of what?
The overall requirement of the operation for steam.
Oh, so the 40% of the requirement of your plant will come from New Fortress?
Yes.
That is a must?
Yes. It's possible that 100% could come, but under a different arrangement where we have the flexibility of taking it or not.
And that is at a fixed price?
That is under a fixed steam agreement.
Steam agreement, meaning you had used $40 per barrel.
Yeah, it's somewhere around there.
Equivalent of $40 per barrel.
Yeah.
Then if the price of oil then goes lower than what you would be paying at that $40 per barrel, then what protection does?
Well, what I tell you is that if oil was at 40 continually, and with the benefits, operating benefits of natural gas on the equipment that you use and some other operational considerations, we wouldn't have to worry.
And I understand, because with the volatility of the price of oil and everything, that you'd want a second source of energy. But you still have to look at the option of the price of oil dipping from time to time too.
Yes.
Now, if you are taking 60% of your required, 40% of your required steam from an entity, and you may be even taking more, I would still love to see where there's a protection for.
Yeah, I'll explain
because,
to you. I'm sorry, explain to you. If we got at the $40 per barrel equivalent, remember, not every producer is using the same as I am. The interplay between the energy prices. It is a mix of things. It would still take me much closer to a producer that has the advantage of the much lower ones like hydro. It would take me much closer. It would take me closer, and we have some other efficiencies, some other advantages here in Jamaica, like where the bauxite is and the distance, haulage, and a number of other things that will make us competitive. So that's why the $40 per barrel equivalent gives me that advantage. And in any case, it is only on 40.
So apart from the steam,
it's only on 40%. It's not on the whole thing.
What will happen to your existing plant power, the one that's heavy fuel oil driven? What will you do with that? And where will you get your electricity needs for the plant? Is that a separate deal you're going to have with New Fortress apart from the steam production? What is going to happen to your
but the discussions on that, and but I can still explain to you without destroying the options we have. Those will be dual fired, dual burners. The burners will now be converted that they can use either natural gas or heavy fuel oil. So we will still have those equipment, and then there are two boilers that will be converted anyway under the arrangement with Fortress at a cost to them. So we'll have dual fire options. We could have dual fire options subject to conclusion of the arrangements around the 60%.
Chairman.
Well,
Member Bunting seemed to be very negative about the present and the future. Member Bunting seemed to be negative about the present and future situation of CAP. But when you look at some of the key findings, the net loss has narrowed, the current ratio has fallen, I mean, your receivables still up, and your debt has worsened, but still a little better relative to the period before. What is your future outlook of the plant, and what is the confidence level that you have about this future?
The ideas that I have about the business arrangement, I really beg you not to push me on the price side, the matters that have to do with price, because we have to talk to other people and so on. But in terms of the operation, it's going to be a much more efficient operation because of the use of natural gas as a part of it. We're also looking at the water management, which is an area that really cost us money in the past in mud lakes. We're going to lay water balance, if you've heard that term. It's an operation that uses a lot of water. So a lot of the times when you pass a lake and you call it mud storage, residue is a better name. Some of them are full of water, or at least most of it is water. Okay? It's expensive to build those expensive storage areas to store water. And we're looking at the whole process of reducing the amount of water that goes to that lake, to those lakes. And one of the things we're doing is looking at the using that same trench that the New Fortress people will use to bring the natural gas into the plant to actually expel water. Again, I mean, these things have to involve NEPA and approvals have to be given and so on. But I think that those two areas, both the efficiencies that will come from the use of natural gas and the whole management of water resources will give us further efficiencies. I'm positive about that. This is without commenting on the political and strategic decision that has to do with selling or not selling. That's for
no,
Chairman.
I just want to clarify something for my colleague. What I understand from the Auditor General's report is that a lot of the improvement in the financial situation, which is really reduced losses. They're still making losses, but a lot of the reduction in losses has come about from favorable movements in prices of the commodity and the fuel, which are things that are completely outside of our control. I mean, it's to a much lesser extent operational efficiencies, although there was operational efficiencies. But from my understanding, and it can be confirmed or denied, but my reading was that the vast majority of the benefit that we've seen flowing through to the financial statement has to do with favorable movements in the international prices of these commodities, which are way outside of our control.
I sent the Auditor General tables that demonstrated that there were significant efficiencies over the years that were not attributed to fuel. If her team doesn't agree with me, I'd be happy to discuss it with them.
I don't think, to my mind, yeah, there have been efficiencies through other initiatives, but the whole question really is you have an operation which continues to lose money, has lost money for many years, where we're in a fragile fiscal environment. If there is some major shock, whether to the price of any of the inputs or to the our sole output, which is alumina, or any environmental shock or whatever, at the end of the day, the large capital that is required to sustain the ownership of an asset like that is a big drag on the public purse. And the question really is, it's been up for privatization for a long time, in theory, perhaps because of those issues. And, you know, the question really is, when is this going to actually take place?
And the only comment I would make is that we have probably been brought to a place where you can make a sensible decision on that. If I'd invite the members, and in fact I know that some of you do read, like the Bloomberg articles on Noble and so on, just visit that and see what they say about Jamaica. Not cap, no, I'm not taking any real credit for it as an asset. Okay.
Chairman, thank you. Mr. Hayden, just want to go back to something earlier on that Member Phillips wrote, point he made. You said that under the arrangement you have a fixed 40% of the steam equivalent that you need coming from this LNG producer's operations. And he was going further to indicate that were the price of oil to fall below that you had based your calculations on, and it was like $40, you said. The 60% were to go below that amount that you have involved in your calculation, and were you to buy the other 60% from them at prices of oil below that figure that you set your first calculations on, wouldn't that be at a lesser price than that 40%?
Yeah, but I'm not buying, I don't buy HFO from them.
No, I know.
I could. So that's a world, I don't know if my understanding of what you asked me is material to your question, but so I'm sorry. I said I don't know if the question, what I seem to have misunderstood is material to your question, but the 60% that is not under this present fortress arrangement, we will have the option of converting that to dual fire, because that's just converting the burners on the boilers. And therefore, in a perfect world, you'd be able to use HFO when it's cheaper and use natural gas when it's cheaper. There are some other operating considerations.
And how much would it cost to do that?
Pardon?
How much would it cost CAP to make that conversion happen?
Nothing.
It appears that for 3 boilers, it could be in the region of 15 million US.
That would be CAP's share of it.
No, that's the capital. That's the capital, overall capital. I'm kind of hesitant because I'm talking about arrangements that are sort of discussions that are kind of current on them. And,
all right. Any other questions for Mr. Hayden or the PS? If not, thank you for coming and for your responses to the questions from members. Members, any other business? There being no other business, date of next meeting, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
yes, sir.
Because the 17th is the fortnight from now. However, there's some training that they're trying to schedule, which they have not yet finalized. So I propose that we leave it for a date to be fixed. And when the dates become clearer, we will notify members. Okay. Can someone move for the adjournment? Thank you, Member Finn. Seconded by Witter and Member One. thank you very much for coming and for your able assistance.
Has been doing a lot of work in Jamaica. The